courtroom was unnervingly silent when 6-year-old Sophie Miller stepped through the heavy oak doors. Her tiny hand clutched the leash of Shadow, a scarred German shepherd whose powerful frame moved with quiet confidence. Every head turned as she entered, the jurors shifting in their seats, the spectators leaning forward. Judge Henry Lawson, a man with nearly 30 years of experience behind the bench, steadied the child with careful eyes. He knew the weight of this entire case rested on her fragile shoulders. And yet, Sophie hadn't spoken a single word since the night her world had been shattered. At the defense table sat Daniel Cross. To the world, he looked ordinary, an average man with thinning hair, rimmed glasses, and a calm, almost harmless expression. But to Sophie, he was the nightmare she could never wake from. His lawyer had built an entire strategy around her silence. No testimony, no proof, he argued, trauma clouds memory. There was no DNA, no fingerprints, no confession. You cannot convict a man based on silence. What the lawyer didn't account for was the dog. As Sophie sat in the witness chair, her hazel eyes flickered nervously across the room. For a moment, they landed on Daniel Cross. Her small hand twitched, a tiny movement so subtle most would have missed it. But Shadow didn't. The dog went rigid. His ears shot forward. His muscles coiled like a spring. Then came the sound, a low, guttural growl that filled the chamber, directed squarely at the man in the defense chair. A ripple of unease swept across the courtroom. Jurors leaned back, spectators whispered. Shadow's reaction wasn't random. It was recognition. Judge Lawson's gavel cracked through the tension like thunder. This court will take a 15-minute recess. His voice was unusually sharp. As people shuffled out, Sophie clung to Shadow's fur, pressing her face against his side as if he were her shield against the world. The judge remained seated, staring down at his notes, his mind racing. In all his years, he had never seen a therapy dog react with such undeniable certainty. Something had just shifted in this case, and he needed to understand what. Before the courtroom, before the nightmares, Sophie was just like any other little girl. She was 6 years old, with a laugh that carried through the house and a curiosity that drove her parents half crazy. She loved painting with watercolors, collecting shiny rocks, and reading storybooks with her mother at night. She was fearless until the day everything changed. It was a warm spring afternoon, the kind that painted the neighborhood in gold. Sophie was outside with her 2 best friends, chalk dust on their fingers, marbles rolling across the driveway. Then, he appeared. A man in a plain jacket walked toward them, carrying a small cage. Inside, 2 tiny birds fluttered, their wings beating nervously against the bars. The man smiled warmly. "Would you like to see more? I have puppies in my car. Special ones, just for kids like you." The children hesitated. Sophie's friend, curious and trusting, stepped closer. Sophie froze. Something about his voice. It was too smooth, too practiced. In a blink, the man grabbed her friend's wrist. From the curb, a black SUV door slid open, waiting. He tried to shove the girls inside, his grip tightening like iron. For a moment, Sophie's body locked with fear, but then instinct exploded within her. She kicked, she clawed, she screamed louder than she had ever screamed before. Her cries echoed down the street. A neighbor watering her plants looked up and shouted. Another rushed from a porch. The man cursed, dragging one child into the SUV while Sophie managed to slip free. The vehicle roared off, tires screeching, leaving Sophie standing in the street, shaking, crying, staring after the van that had taken her friend. From that night forward, Sophie's voice disappeared. In the days that followed, Sophie stopped talking. Not a whisper, not a word. Doctors called it selective mutism, a response to severe trauma. Her parents tried everything: music, drawing, endless hugs. Nothing broke through. That's when Dr. Claire Warren, a therapist who specialized in trauma and animal therapy, suggested a dog. Not just any dog. Shadow, a retired canine who carried his own scars. Shadow had once served on the city's police force. He had been fearless, dependable, a hero in fur. But during a dangerous raid years earlier, he had taken a knife meant for an officer. The scar down his flank was the memory he carried forever. Deemed unfit for active duty, Shadow had been retired, forgotten, until Dr. Warren stepped in. The first time Sophie met him, she stood frozen. Shadow didn't move either. He simply sat, watching her with steady amber eyes. Minutes passed before Sophie extended her small hand. Shadow leaned forward, nose brushing her palm. That single touch became a bond that nothing could break. From then on, they were inseparable. When nightmares came, it was Shadow's steady heartbeat that grounded her. When silence threatened to swallow her whole, it was Shadow's presence that reminded her she wasn't alone. One evening, as Sophie traced the scar along his side, a whisper escaped her lips. "Good boy." It was the first word she had spoken in weeks. Her mother wept. Shadow simply wagged his tail. Now, in the tense courtroom, that bond mattered more than anyone could have imagined. The prosecutor's voice was gentle. "Sophie, do you remember the man who tried to take you?" Sophie's small fingers curled into Shadow's fur. She didn't speak. Instead, slowly, she raised her hand and pointed directly at Daniel Cross. Gasps filled the room. The defense attorney shot up. "Objection! This child has been shown photographs of my client. This identification is unreliable." "Overruled," Judge Lawson said firmly. "The jury will determine credibility." Daniel Cross's calm mask slipped for a fraction of a second. His jaw tightened. His fingers drummed nervously at the table. Shadow growled again, deep, primal, certain. The jury couldn't look away. During the recess, Detective Ryan Holt, the lead investigator, leaned toward the judge. "Your Honor, dogs don't lie. Shadow recognizes them. I'd bet my badge on it." Judge Lawson nodded slowly. "Then maybe it's time to dig deeper." Meanwhile, in the defense chamber, Daniel Cross sat across from his lawyer, his face pale. He muttered under his breath, "The girl knows. The dog knows." His lawyer frowned. "What are you talking about?" Cross forced a smile. "Nothing," but inside, panic was spreading. He had underestimated Sophie. He had underestimated the scarred dog. The trial pressed on. Witnesses testified, neighbors, experts, the shaken friend who had been rescued days later by law enforcement. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together, and through it all, Sophie never spoke. She didn't need to. Her eyes, her hand signals, and Shadow's unwavering instincts spoke louder than words ever could. The jury saw more than evidence. They saw the way Sophie trembled whenever Daniel entered the room. They saw the way Shadow placed himself between them, growling low, refusing to let the man out of his sight. It wasn't coincidence. It was truth. In the final week of testimony, Detective Holt revealed something chilling. The black SUV had been found, burned, abandoned in another county. Inside, forensic teams had discovered faint traces of feathers and a small wire cage, the same kind of cage the man had used to lure Sophie. The courtroom went silent. For the first time, Daniel Cross's mask cracked completely. His calm demeanor shattered, replaced by the raw, cornered look of a predator finally seen for what he was. And Sophie, clutching Shadow, lifted her head for the first time and whispered one word. "Monster." The single word carried across the chamber, fragile, yet unbreakable. Shadow's ears flicked, his body pressed closer, as if standing guard over the child who had finally found her voice. Judge Lawson leaned forward, his eyes never leaving the defendant. For the first time in weeks, he felt the tide of justice turning. Because sometimes truth doesn't come in long speeches or polished evidence. Sometimes it comes in the courage of a child. Sometimes it comes in the growl of a scarred dog who refuses to forget. And sometimes that's all it takes to bring a monster down.